This is SPD Wolf. He's held the speedrunning record for Castlevania multiple times over the years. We're entering stage 13 of Castlevania, and he's going to move Simon to the right in a rather odd way. However, there's a method to this madness. A series of inputs to the controller has glitched the level in a very specific place, a place where Simon normally steps off a stairwell and continues walking to the left. But not this time. The stairs didn't stop. Simon continued upward and arrived in a later section, skipping some gameplay and saving precious time. It was accomplished thanks to glitching the scrolling of the game by moving Simon, and therefore the camera, in such a way that this area of blocks of level data did not load properly. User-controllable scroll manipulation for Castlevania was discovered in the summer of 2020, and the methods used and areas exploited have evolved ever since. In this video, we're going to examine how this is possible by peering into the inner workings of the game. This is going to get technical. First of all, let's talk about how scrolling works from the standpoint of building the level that Simon traverses. There is more to scrolling than simply moving a camera. We can't load an entire level into video RAM, it won't fit. We only have room for 2 screens worth of background tiles. Logic has to examine where Simon is and in what direction he is moving in order to load stage background makeup before it scrolls onto the screen. When we reach the proverbial edge of VRAM, be it the start or the end, we wrap around to the other side. If Simon is moving right, background data is loaded into columns that are half a screen past the camera's right. Turn around and walk left, and the process reverses. The graphics are loaded in blocks of 32 pixels by 32 pixels. The topmost block is loaded first, and we see only a 16 pixel height for this one, and then 32 by 32 blocks are loaded underneath, from top to bottom, drawing down the screen inside a 32 pixel wide column as the camera continues to move. Top to bottom and column by column, the blocks are replaced with newly loaded level data. If we stop moving, the graphics stop loading. Our goal is to take this simple operation, the loading of level data during scrolling, and break it. Now, how do we do that using an NES controller? Our dive begins. The camera's X position is shown at the top of the screen. I can move right and the value increases. When I walk left, the camera moves left and the number decreases. Pretty simple. We have 2 screens worth of information in VRAM, 256 pixels across for a single screen times 2. If you divide this into columns that are 32 pixels across, you get 16 columns. Castlevania maintains 2 numbers that represent the left side and right side bookend offset columns, we'll call them. Our camera is between them. Naturally, they change as the camera moves, and the next column is targeted for loaded level data. Currently, the left side bookend is column 0. Add 15 to this, and right side bookend is column 15. If I start walking to the right, we want to load the graphics for the last bookend, column 15, so we do that. Once the camera has moved its first 32 pixels, we've completed the first column. Our offsets increment. Our 2 screens worth of information now spans columns 1 through 16. Our figurative seam has moved here. Let's return to the beginning. Since we can't walk to the left from the start of the game, the garbage tiles for columns 0 to 3 don't matter. As for these garbage tiles, would you like to see them in the game? Let's change the right bookend offset in RAM from 15 to 0. That sets us up so that once I start moving the camera, the game will think it needs to load column 0 instead of column 15 and proceed from there. It draws these garbage columns in the same order we saw them in the PPU viewer at the start of the game. 2 gray columns, 2 garbage columns, and if I jump into the abyss and freeze it before taking a death, you can see the very first column of the start of the game with the tree, plus the second column with the statue. If I let the game roll so we lose a life, the game respawns us at the start, resets the bookend offsets, and reloads the proper background tiles into VRAM once again for current columns used, plus 4 columns to camera left and 3 columns to camera right. A single untouched column retains those gray bricks. They are left over from our little hack. But as you know, this will be the first column to receive background updates when we walk to the right. The appropriate graphics overwrite the leftover data. We now know about column layout, camera movement, and the bookends changing after every 32 pixels of continuous camera movement in either direction. If these numbers were too much to process, the fundamental questions they help answer are, where are we and where are we going? As we move, the direction we are going is used to load level data for where we will eventually be. If we can confuse the game logic that uses camera direction to know where we are going and therefore which associated level data and graphics to load, perhaps we can alter where the game lets us go. The key lies within the logic that loads level data for a given 32 pixel wide column. While we could walk the code and level data involved, it's a lot easier to use graphics to explain this one. Earlier, we observed column updates in the PPU viewer. If we show updates regardless of if data has changed or not, we can see that each column is written to twice as the camera moves. Let's use scripting to draw boxes inside the game screen and represent the background tiles being written to VRAM off screen that we can see in the PPU viewer. The game maintains a block counter in RAM to keep track of which block it should update. I wrote the block counter's value inside the boxes I am drawing. As the camera moves across a lateral distance of 32 pixels, the block counter updates the appropriate column twice. Graphics update on 1 through 6. Once the camera has moved 32 pixels, the block counter is reset to 0 and the bookend column offsets are incremented. We start the process of loading appropriate level data and drawing the next column, 16, to VRAM, and the process repeats. First pass, second pass, and the block counter resets, bookends increment, and so on. Our Castlevania scroll analyzer is growing in complexity. There's a value in RAM, we'll call it tile refresh, that alternates between 0 and 32 to represent when the camera crosses from one set of 32 pixels into the next set of 32. Instead of using the values, let's use the letters A and B. This helps the tile refresh stand out from the numbers on the screen. I'll also match the color of the tile refresh value to the boxes we are drawing. Draw column A once, twice, draw column B once, twice, and so forth. Tile refresh alternates every 32 pixels. Clockwork, so long as I keep walking to the right. For 32 pixels of horizontal travel starting from 0, the block counter rolls from 0 to 7 twice, or 16 times total. The columns are drawn at half the rate of the horizontal travel, so long as you keep moving. This is by design. Now you may have noticed that I've continued to repeat "as long as you keep moving" as a caveat. Time for some finer points. Castlevania makes use of a frame counter in RAM that does what it's called and continues to count frames for the game. This can be used for several things, including knowing how to split up logic so it doesn't run every single frame. Why would you do that? The answer is performance. Let's oversimplify and say you only have 7 values to analyze and/or operations to perform for your logic in the game. You could just examine each value and perform the necessary actions every frame. Unfortunately, this may result in performance problems. The game may slow down in some places as it has to churn through all this logic every frame. We certainly know what slowdown is on the NES. Alternatively, you could run high priority items each frame and distribute other checks so they run every other frame, or even every several frames. Speedrunners are aware of how often specific logic is executed, and they refer to this frequency as a frame rule. Controller input? Pretty important. Best to handle that every frame. Checking to see if we need to open a door, move Simon forward, and then shut the door? Probably don't need to check that every single frame. Scrolling is updated every other frame, and uses this frame counter to know if we should update scrolling or not. As a matter of fact, I can freeze the frame counter in RAM on an odd or even number to force columns to be updated every frame or not at all. Freeze the frame counter on an odd value and the columns are updated on every frame twice as fast as the default method. Freeze the frame counter on an even value and the columns never update. We're left with whatever garbage was loaded at the start of the stage. Speaking of stage, our stage is set. All values we want to monitor are now in place. Now for some important observations. In normal gameplay, Simon can reverse direction when the player wants. When the reversal occurs, the block counter just continues increasing as usual, despite the fact blocks are now being loaded off the opposite side of the screen. Second key point. The block counter resets whenever we cross a tile refresh boundary. We illustrated this with a color change and a swap between values A and B. Even if we're in the middle of updating a column, the block counter resets at the tile refresh boundary. This helps us find a starting point for executing a specific scrolling exploit. Now, in order to manipulate level loading, we do the following. Use our knowledge of 32 pixel tile refresh distances to know where on screen we need to stand to start the block counter at our desired value. Move in the direction we want to go and load column blocks up until the block we want to skip loading. Use a very short movement in the opposite direction to swap the side of the screen the loading logic uses to load level data. Repeat steps 2 and 3 until we cross a tile refresh boundary, update the bookends, and therefore begin loading the next column. That's the magic formula. Let's use stage 13 as our example. Under normal circumstances, we walk to the right, make our way up 2 sets of stairs, and continue to the left. The second set of stairs drops us off when we hit the next set of floor tiles here. This is the block that we saw SPD Wolf exploit earlier. These tiles are not on the screen when the level first loads, and he kept this garbage data in VRAM by performing a scrolling exploit technique. If we use the PPU viewer, you can see the original garbage data here is still in place after moving right. Simon can now walk up those stairs and doesn't have a way to get off of them on this screen. The logic lets him keep going and climb to the next level up. This bypasses having to walk all the way to the left, climb the stairs, deal with the skeletons on the next screen, climb more stairs, walk right, and climb down. Now how do we do it? There are multiple methods to choose from. I'm going to use an early method the community calls the 214 turnback method. 2 pixel turnbacks with 14 pixel walk forwards. To execute a turnback, we will be making use of a whip method. By using the whip a frame after pressing back, we can move Simon 2 pixels. The whip is used to stop him from walking too far. We could only move 1 pixel and still have a 50% chance that we got that single block right in the opposite direction, but we're guaranteed this update if we move 2 pixels because we know we executed logic on both an even and odd frame counter. Let's examine SPD Wolf's method from his 11.05.717 former world record run in more detail. A jump from this point is used to start the move. 2 pixel turnaround. Holy water was thrown as the D-pad also received an up press on the maneuver. Walk forward 14 pixels. A whip technique to slide Simon backward. He didn't turn around, so this was likely a single pixel movement with a 50% chance of executing scrolling logic depending on if the frame counter was on an odd or even number. In fact, he later states,
"It's probably not gonna work."
But fortunately, the slide happened on an odd numbered frame counter, and
it worked. Okay.
As for the remainder of that sequence, one last 14 pixel walk forward, a quick turnaround with no whip this time, exploit complete. Let's perform an exploit in the emulator and see the step-by-step behind-the-scenes values. I'll combine the column number with the block being updated in my narration, like 16.2 or 1.3, so you know which side of the screen I'm talking about in addition to which block. Here we go. The initial scene looks like this. Our span is columns 0 to 15. I've cleared all enemies and candles, disabled respawning, and frozen the game timer. I'm a programmer, not a speedrunner. We line Simon up with a rivet here and perform a backward jump by pressing A and immediately holding right and down. Column 15 iterates through block updates 1 through 6 twice. Our camera X position rolls up past 32, the bookend offsets update to 1 and 16, and blocks 16.1 and 16.2 are drawn. We stop just short of drawing 16.3 as Simon lands facing right. Next is a whip turnaround to move left 2 pixels. This updates 1.3 in the left direction and prevents using new graphics for 16.3 to overwrite the garbage tile we want to keep. We then walk forward and finish blocks 16.4 through 16.6, start our second pass for the column, and update 16.1 and 16.2 once again. Whip turnaround to bypass the 16.3 right and draw to 1.3 on the left once again. Walk forward to finish 16.4, 5, 6, 1, and 2. Whip turnaround one last time to right to 1.3 yet again. And now we're done. Once Simon starts walking right, the camera X position reaches 64 pixels, the offsets increment, and we are no longer in danger of drawing to column 16 as we move to the right, as we have crossed the tile refresh threshold. Here's the play-by-play of the exploit. It should help illustrate the journey across the screen. The fundamental goal is to not overwrite a 32 by 32 block or blocks that we wish to keep. There are a few other methods that are perhaps worth mentioning. Instead of a 14 forward and 2 back, some runners like to use a 12 forward and 4 back. This targets 2 blocks for the glitch and provides some wiggle room, no pun intended, to allow for a mistake in the input sequence. Ideally, any mistake that occurs happens on the block you don't care about. Here, Trisk uses a quick rhythmic left-right input on the D-pad to demonstrate a whipless 412 technique. No mistakes were made, and this results in 2 32x32 blocks of garbage instead of just 1. JC uses whipless 412 and 214 techniques depending on the exploited area. A whipless 214 technique has less of a margin for error and is therefore risky, but the method selected by the runner may simply depend on that runner's muscle memory. Use whatever works. Although we have focused on a specific section of Stage 13, there are other areas where this exploit is used. Later in Stage 14, it lets Simon not only walk backward through an area where there used to be a wall, but also draw a scroll stop with a door mechanic on the screen, letting him quickly skip ahead to Stage 15. How did we manage that? After arriving on Stage 14, the set of stairs that leave the first screen place us here. There's no scrolling to the right from here, we go up and then left. Adjacent level data in these columns when the screen is first drawn is not used. The first screen of the game had garbage data that we investigated, but here we seem to have legitimate level data. Does it look familiar? It appears to be from the boss room. You fight death in a room with this design and a door on the left side. You never walk through that door as you have to defeat the boss and collect the orb to complete the stage, but it would appear that we can use this scroll stop and door thanks to our scrolling exploit in order to skip ahead to Stage 15. I haven't verified the level data, but it makes sense. Turnbacks are also used in the Crusher room in Stage 6 in order to create a tiny bit of a staircase that lets Simon climb all the way up to the Medusa battle and skip the normal corridors traversed. JC's world record run of 10:45.283 showcases several scrolling exploits, and I recommend you check that video out to see more of them in action. Well, I hope you enjoyed this examination of the scroll glitch in Castlevania. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this one. I also have a Patreon available for those of you interested, and thanks for watching.